Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Modernizing Network Engineering and Operations in the Era of Hybrid and Remote Work. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be moderating today's event. Our featured speaker is Shamus McGillicuddy, VP of Research covering Network Management at EMA. Shamus has nearly 2 decades of experience in the IT industry. His research focuses on all aspects of managing enterprise networks, including network automation, AIOps-driven network operations, multi-cloud networking, and WAN transformation. And before I hand things over to Shamus, I wanted the audience to know that he will be concluding his presentation by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email with the on-demand playback, as well as additional information about this new research. So I hope you'll check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, Shamus McGillicuddy. Shamus?
Thank you, Raleigh, and thank you, everyone, for joining me today. So we're here to talk about my latest market research on what's happening in the world of networks, enterprise networks. This one in particular looks at how the rise of hybrid and remote work is impacting IT networks and how network infrastructure and operations teams are responding to that. It's sponsored by these 4 companies here. It's independent analyst research where we go out and survey the industry and write up a report. It's made financially feasible by the support of vendors like Ovic, Broadcom, CloudPrink, and NetScout, who are all very interested in what IT organizations are doing on this topic, and so they decided to financially support the research. So first off, I just want to talk about my research goals and the methodology involved in conducting that research. So I've been seeing indications for a while, and probably everyone on this webinar have, that the pandemic changed the way people work, and hybrid work has emerged as a new normal. On several occasions, I've surveyed IT professionals about what's happening with remote work in the wake of the pandemic, and over again, I saw indications that there are more people working from home on at least a part-time basis everywhere, and it's impacting IT organizations. So in this research, some of our initial questions that we asked of people taking our survey was, have you observed a permanent increase in remote work since the pandemic? And 94% said yes. And we asked them, what percentage of your employees work from home before the pandemic? What percentage work from home today? And where will that number be in 2025? And you see here, it went from 17%, the average respondent organization in early 2020, to 43% today are working from home, and 49% expected by 2025. So it's not going back down to pre-pandemic levels. If anything, it's getting bigger. There's been a lot of conversations about return to work, but it's not really happening. But it is happening to some degree, because 96% of the IT organizations we surveyed told us that they're supporting hybrid workers. Those are people who split their time between the home and the office. They might come into the office once or twice a week. 39% of the remote workers in the average organization we surveyed are described as hybrid workers. That is 39% of all employees who work remotely are hybrid workers. They are coming into the office occasionally, which means that you need to support them at home and at the office as an IT organization. And that can get a little complex. Only 32% of the IT organizations in our survey told us that they felt like they'd been completely successful with enabling and supporting the networking requirements of these remote and hybrid workers. And so that leads to the questions that I want to explore in my research. How are IT organizations modernizing things like secure remote access to make sure that people have a good and secure experience when they're connecting to corporate resources from home or from somewhere other than the office, maybe a coffee shop or whatever? How is the network operations team evolving its tools and processes to support this expansion of remote and hybrid work? And how are hybrid workers driving changes in the on-premises networks? Because we've seen that it's not just about enabling those people while they're working from home. Those people work differently when they come into the office, and it forces changes to the networks there. In terms of methodology, we surveyed 354 IT professionals directly engaged with connecting, securing, and supporting remote workers. And then this is their demographic information. The big takeaway here is that we surveyed a cross-section of people in IT organizations from the executive level all the way down to engineering and admin level, from a variety of groups. The most common ones are IT architecture, network engineering, project and program management, the implementers of technology, some security people in there, some people working in NOCs and IT service desk or help desks, wide variety of industries, at least a dozen represented, but you see the big ones there. And also, pretty big distribution by company size in terms of revenue and employee count, small, medium, and large enterprise. And then it was a cross-Atlantic view of things. With in North America, it was the United States and Canada. In Europe, it was France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. So let's start out by asking ourselves, like, what challenges are IT organizations facing when they're trying to support the networking needs of people working from home? These are the issues that IT professionals complain about the most. First, they're really struggling with compliance risk and security risk. Like, those people working from home, they're accessing data and applications that may have only been accessed from within the corporate network perimeter in the past. Now they're doing a lot of work at home, dealing with sensitive data, dealing with accessing things that without necessarily the protection of network security devices that are screening for malware and things like that. They are opening up new points of attack, and also creating opportunities for data loss and things like that. So they need to address that. Obviously, I mean, that's why VPNs have been around forever, but as we'll see in a second, VPNs are not really up to the task of what's happening at this point. Poor IT leadership, CIOs, CTOs, CISOs, they're not providing the people in the IT, the lower down the organization, with the support they need, the direction they need, and how to do this. Tell us what's your priority, security or user experience? Because we've got to find a balance, but sometimes we may have to, sacrifice experience for security, and, decisions like that need to be made further up the chain. And then these people are saying, oh, that's not really happening. We're kind of fending for ourselves in strategic direction. 24% told us one of their biggest pain points was a lack of control over the home networks of their employees. So, I'm doing this webinar from my house right now, where I'm using an ISP's modem and a wireless access point. And I gotta tell you, like, at least once a day, if not 2 or 3 times a day, like, it just doesn't perform well. It's not enterprise class, and there's no way that IT support for my company is ready to tackle the issue of, like, well, your ISP is terrible, I'm really sorry, we don't really have control over that. So big issue there. Lack of skilled personnel is another one. The people they have are stretched too thin. There are new skills that maybe they need in order to tackle this new reality, and they don't have them. Collaboration issues across IT, because we're seeing that the network team is trying to partner up with other groups on certain aspects of supporting these remote workers, and that might not necessarily be going well for a lot of them. And then budget, which kind of ties back to the poor IT leadership piece here. They don't have the money to adopt the solutions they need to fix what's wrong. Organizations that told us they're doing the worst with supporting the needs of these remote workers were more likely to point to the number one issue here, the compliance risk and the security risk. Like they were really struggling with that more than other organizations. So that's something you got to watch out for. I think most people would agree that, you really need to focus on compliance and security when you're opening up your network like this at the edge. And people who are in highly technical roles in an IT organization told us that they're really concerned and struggling with that lack of control over the home networks. So that's something that CIO people like further up in the organization, like CTO, CIOs aren't really thinking about. They're like, oh, well, today in the United States, like internet's just reliable. Like people have good home connections, don't they? Well, no, not necessarily. You think about how much you're paying all those people that are working from home. Can some of them afford the premium types of connectivity? Like, a lot of them might be living in an apartment building that has shared Wi-Fi, for instance, and they can't afford their own internet connection. It's bundled with their rent. And that shared Wi-Fi isn't great. And then network engineering teams, people specifically in a network engineering group told us that they're really unhappy with how collaboration is playing out in all of this. So that's something that I think IT leadership also needs to play a role in. They need to make sure that all the groups are moving in the same direction to make things work. The network engineering team is saying, hey, we've been sidelined. End user support's not playing nice with us. Security group doesn't know how to talk to us. Give us a hand here. These are the most common sources of network experience trouble that network teams are seeing when they're trying to support end users working from home. And you see echoes of what I've already talked about here. 42% said, hey, we're often struggling with problems with the home Wi-Fi network setup. Like their home office is on the opposite side of the house from the Wi-Fi access point. It's not good. Or it's like 2 stories, it's on the ground floor and they're in like the attic or the basement, and it's just not great. And also it's like, it's an access point that their ISP put in their house in 2019, and it's 2023, and it'd be really nice if they got a new one. 42% said, distance from our apps has increased as people got more distributed, as we started hiring people who are permanent remote because they're on the other side of the country or whatever, but they're exactly who we wanted. Now we've got this latency issue where people are too far away from our apps. We need to do something about that. Maybe distribute applications into more clouds or whatever. And that was an issue especially problematic for the largest enterprises in the survey. ISP quality. Hey, we sent all our workers home and discovered that 20% of them live in rural areas with really bad ISP quality, and they just never have much bandwidth available to them. It's always, there's always routing issues with their ISP, and they don't really have any other options in terms of terrestrial connectivity, but we could maybe drop like a 4G, 5G router into their house and that would solve it. Bandwidth used by family, roommates, other cohabitants. You're doing a webinar like this and suddenly somebody in the other room is playing a video game or watching a high definition streaming service, and you can't hear me anymore. And then inefficient internet routing, ISP congestion at peak periods, and contention with shared Wi-Fi and multi-family housing, all causing a lot of pain for organizations. And something that's kind of lurking in the background is people are working differently day to day. 89% of the people in our survey told us that they have observed an increase in the use of real-time voice, video, and collaboration applications since the start of the pandemic. And that is not going away. Like that people just do that more. Like I haven't dialed into a 1-800 conference line in 4 years, like that's history. I used to do that on a semi-regular basis before the pandemic, but I don't even really use my phone anymore. I'm 100% collaborating through my laptop with things like Teams and Zoom and WebEx, and that means bandwidth is at a premium. So modernizing secure remote access and network architecture. We asked people, what solutions are you using right now to provide secure remote access to your people at home? And you see, it doesn't add up to 100 because people are using a lot of different things. Like there's still a lot of legacy VPN out there. It's going to be a while before it goes away. I've talked to people who have like 3 different solutions in place. Like they've got the legacy VPN, but then they added like, you see the bottom here, SD-WAN. I talked to one person who's a customer of one of these sponsors, and they were using the VPN at the beginning of the pandemic. Then they started sending SD-WAN boxes to users, and then they started using sort of a hybrid access as a service solution that's kind of like a combines ZTNA with some of the path optimization, some of the network optimization and acceleration that you might see from an SD-WAN solution. Anyway, what you're seeing here is VPN use very high, secure access service edge, secure direct access to cloud providers like AWS, pretty common, and then secondarily or tertiary use of emerging, more maturing solutions like zero trust network access and software-defined perimeter solutions. We also followed up the question on what are they using with, what do you think is most effective at supporting this huge population of remote users you have now, and only 47% said the VPN was an ideal solution. I think that number is going to continue to go down as people get more experience with this whole new world. Like they're going to realize that the alternative technologies like the ones you see below VPN are more effective and more of a long-term solution, and not just for secure access, but a good experience for their end users, because productivity is a premium consideration. We also found that zero trust network access here, although it's like a tertiary priority, it was a preferred solution for certain technical groups like network engineering, network operations, and cybersecurity all singled that out, or something like a zero trust network access solution as an ideal approach, not VPN, but something more dynamic like a ZTNA solution. So what kind of features they want in their secure remote access solutions? Well, first of all, they want integrated network security, which is probably why you saw SASE so high. Like they don't just want to have like tunnels into corporate resources. They want security controls somewhere along that path. You know, like, oh, it'd be great if we had some anti-malware in there. Maybe like the traffic gets routed through a firewall, or there's like some secure web gateway in place, maybe a CASB solution if they're connecting to a lot of SASE services. So that's not just, creating this tunnel into your corporate resources, but also integrating the security controls that would normally be applied if everything was inside the perimeter, everyone was inside the perimeter. And of course, they want some automation around the creation of those connections, into cloud and data center resources. Not you don't want to rely on like your end users to comply with network access policies and stuff. You want a solution that is robust enough to sort of automate the whole process of getting people authenticated and authorized onto your networks, and having dynamic policies around that, and then centralized management. Don't want a situation where you're like relying on CLI, like command line interface, to manage a VPN concentrator and add people to an access list in a different system, like you want centralized management. Maybe like there's like a centralized management component of the solution that has API integration with like a lot of your identity and access management solutions, so that you can have all your policy controls in one place. You can adjust things in one place. That everyone is compliant with your policies in one place. If you need to make a major change to how remote access happens, you can do it in that one place. So that's important to them. And then you see the latter half of this, like a lot of people pointed out, like capabilities that can improve the experience of these remote workers, like WAN LAN remediation, doing things like forward error correction, WAN acceleration, caching some stuff, optimizing network protocols so that everything moves more efficiently across the network, and path selection, identifying network paths that are, whether you have like maybe you have like a fixed wireless connection and also a ISP connection, wired terrestrial ISP connection in your house, and maybe it's path selection there if you have like an SD-WAN endpoint deployed in your home. But it also might be like selecting the best path across the internet, avoiding like inefficient routing that might, for instance, take you from Boston, where I am, to like an AWS region on the West Coast. For some reason, like your ISP has got that routing in place. But if you have a good secure access solution that can make decisions on where your traffic goes, it can say, hey, maybe we should send this traffic to the Mid-Atlantic region instead of California. So that's something that a lot of people are getting interested in. Screen is frozen. There we go. All right. Network hardware in the home. So I mentioned like some people are dropping SD-WAN boxes into their homes. There are other stuff going there too. 72% of the people we surveyed for this research told us that they're installing some kind of network hardware in employees' homes. And the typical extent was 25% to 50% of homes. People who were aggressive with that hardware deployment, like sending it to more homes, tended to have a more aggressive, ambitious goal for what kind of network experience they had, that they wanted to deliver to those people working from home. So the CIO at the top is saying, hey, we want all these people who are delivering value to our business to have a good, consistent, and secure experience at home. Here's the budget. Maybe you need to drop some hardware. Now on the right, you see what kind of hardware they're thinking about. And at the top of the list, 63% almost said network security, like a firewall. Now, don't look at that and say, my God, 63% of companies are saying they're sending firewalls to all their users. I don't think that's what this means. What I think this is, I think a lot of enterprises are sending like UTM appliances to the homes of their C-suites, like CEOs, CTOs, CFOs, whatever. Those guys get like full suites of work from home solutions, basically a corporate branch in their home office, And so so they're sending like, next generation firewall maybe, and then maybe some other high value employees are getting it. But that number kind of confused me at first. And then I was like, no, it makes sense. Like every company's got like a C-suite that needs to be buttoned down. So it makes sense that they're prioritizing that. Another one that makes more sense for a wider number of people in an organization is the 54% of enterprises that say they've sent out some Wi-Fi access points to some people. I mean, I've talked to multiple people anecdotally that have done this for a variety of reasons. Like I mentioned, oh, well, we've got people living in apartment buildings with shared Wi-Fi, and it's just not up to the task because they are customer support reps. And so we're going to send a 5G or 4G router with an attached Wi-Fi access point to them to deploy in their apartments. We also see that happen in, high value employees in general, where they're just like, you know what, we don't like your setup. But we need you to work from home for whatever reason. Because of the way our business is set up at the moment. So we're sending you an access point to improve your LAN experience. Another one that's not too surprising, telecommunications equipment like phones, video conferencing endpoints, things like that. We already mentioned that almost all of these enterprises have seen a surge in real-time communications application usage. So it makes sense that some of them are getting hardware specifically for those applications. And then, I just already mentioned this, but fixed mobile connectivity like 4G, 5G is going out in a lot of enterprises. And then less common, the SD-WAN gateways and the routers, which are may be interchangeable in a lot of the minds of survey takers, depending on their level of sophistication and how slowly and closely they read this survey question. So that's the hardware piece that you might be thinking about, you might have already done, you might be like, no, this is crazy, I can't afford this, but it's happening. I've talked to multiple people that have deployed SD-WAN appliances to homes. I've talked to multiple people deployed Wi-Fi access points and fixed mobile connectivity routers and all kinds of stuff. So updating the network ops teams, tool set, and processes. We're seeing, yet again, the NetOps team is being forced to break out of their silos. Like they've been kind of sidelined in a lot of areas, like the move to the cloud sidelined them, for instance. They have to reassert themselves. Like the network team isn't always taking the lead on what the strategy is for supporting these people that work from home. That's often like end user support or IT architecture, or maybe even security. But the network team is having to join cross-group action teams or committees on what to do, collaborating with people on how they address things from a strategic and from a tactical point of view. So on the left, you see these are the groups that NetOps team has increased collaboration with in order to address the surge in remote and hybrid work. So number one on the list, security, which is a common ally for the networks operations team in a lot of different areas, including cloud, SD-WAN and SASE implementations. And here we see remote work. And then the IT service management group, the people that sort of manage like ticketing and end user support and like process and best practices. The organizations that were the most successful at supporting remote work were more likely to point to that as an important and increasingly common collaboration partner for network operations. And then you see, the subgroup end user support or the help desk, which is favored for organizations that are really focused on work from home experience. And then you see cloud ops and app management, because as I mentioned, we've got a lot of people who are saying, well, a lot of these remote workers are just too far from our applications, like in terms of geography. We've got to change things. We've got to deploy our applications in new places. And so those groups are getting roped into NetOps meetings. On the right, we see how these network teams are trying to enable that collaboration to make it work. Cross-silo tool integrations. Let's integrate with ServiceNow. Let's integrate with our SIM product for security monitoring. Let's integrate with cloud orchestration. So, we can deploy apps readily to new places to support the, 50 developers we just hired in Europe, Eastern Europe or something, because we don't have an office anymore that they need to report to. And then you see nearly half are trying to do something about documenting processes and best practices, which explains why they're, buddying up with the IT service management group, and updated ticketing and IT service management systems so that, response to complaints from users is handled properly and routed to the NetOps team when it needs to be. And then let's train some people on some new tools, new technologies, maybe, how to deal with people. I remember talking to one network engineer who told me that she was talking to end users more than she used to because of work from home. Like she thought she had graduated out of end user support. Like she didn't think she'd ever be like doing one-on-one like support calls with individual users ever again. And because thousands of people are working from home, she was getting a lot of calls that roped her into things like, why can't my Wi-Fi network work in my house? Why can't I use Zoom to talk to a patient? Because I'm a doctor, whatever. And then 42% said they're consolidating leadership. Like, okay, maybe it's no longer a good idea to have like directors that have competing interests that are protecting fiefdoms in these two groups. Let's, move these groups closer together by having them report into one person that wants them both to work together. They're updating tool sets. 87% of the people we surveyed told us that they have allocated budget for specifically updating network management tool sets for the whole work from home revolution. How's it being spent? 56% in, under overall strategy on the left, you see 56% said, well, we're spending that on updating existing tools. Maybe we've changed licensing so we could, monitor more objects. Maybe we are adding a module from to our existing tool that they were offering to solve work from home. 49% said, oh, we've acquired new tools from new vendors we've never worked with before. And 48% said, hey, well, our existing vendor, their incumbent tool that we were using couldn't solve this one thing that we needed it to do. But then they said, hey, we just came out with this new tool that can help. Or we just bought this company that offers this tool that can help. And so, yeah, okay, we'll buy that. That's great. As long as, and maybe you can integrate it with our incumbent tools so everything works together. Hopefully they're doing that. Organizations with, well, on the right, you see the chart, like, hey, what do you use to monitor and troubleshoot remote workers' networking experience and, respond to their complaints, whatever. So 81% said, oh, we're using remote desktop access tools. And I've been on the other side of a support call like that. And, that's fine and everything. The guy comes in and spends like an hour trying to figure out why my backup as a service application is broken and consuming all my battery on my laptop. And does it every month or two, just complaining, sorry. Yeah, so he spends an hour doing that. But how's that scale if you're, trying to do that across like 300, 3,000, 30,000 users? I don't think it does. So I don't think that's it is like a frontline tool, but I don't think it should be the go-to tool. It's usually a very cheap tool. What you're seeing also very popular endpoint monitoring or endpoint management tools, things that can look at transactions and device state and maybe even like do some real user monitoring. That's a very popular tool right now. And you see network infrastructure monitoring. It's, there's a lot of hardware out in homes, so they're monitoring it with SNMP, MIDS and traps-based monitoring. And you even see network flow monitoring being very important. That also makes a lot of sense given what's being pushed out there. Packet monitoring and analysis. Keep in mind, a lot of these people, some people I talk to say, well, the main thing that I do to solve problems and to monitor and troubleshoot remote user experience is I keep a very close eye on my VPN concentrator. I monitor the heck out of that. That's not going to get the job done, but all of your incumbent infrastructure monitoring tools, your flow monitoring tools probably can keep an eye on that. Packet monitoring analysis is also pretty popular. And well over half are using one or two different types of synthetic or active network monitoring solutions. I split it into two types. There's the one that relies on points of presence on the internet, like internet pops that sort of watch how traffic is moving across the internet and can tell you, for instance, oh, well, everyone in this region is having a problem with your applications in AWS because of this. And then you also have the edge point of view with synthetic and active monitoring, where you may be deploying probes to a variety of users at homes to see what their experience is as they are logging into and interacting with applications on your network. Organizations that had budget allocated for modernizing their tool sets were more likely to use some kind of synthetic tool, some synthetic active monitoring tool, and endpoint monitoring. And that makes sense because those are two tools that are not traditionally in the network manager's tool set a lot of the times. And what you're seeing here is when they get budget, they're saying we need to expand what we use for network operations now that we are supporting a lot of end users at home. So another thing I mentioned at the top was, how hybrid workers kind of changed the on-prem network. So we asked these people in our survey, how is hybrid work impacting your on-premise networks, your campus networks, your branches, whatever. And we found that 76% of network teams who support hybrid work, they are reporting increased bandwidth demand on their networks. Like there's just more, they're having to upgrade their switching and their Wi-Fi. They're having to increase the bandwidth on their WAN circuits because there's just so much traffic hitting their network more than before. Because because as you recall, like a lot of these people are now collaborating using voice and video and real-time collaboration applications, whereas before they might have talked on the phone, they might have had conference room meetings, they might have traveled to another office to meet with people face to face. Now, like their first instinct is to send someone an invite to a video conference, whether that they are at home or the office. Like that person might be on they might be trying to collaborate with somebody in the same building, but they don't think it's convenient to walk two floors up to see the person face to face, because they can just like send a video conference invite to them, which allows them both to work from their desk and have access to all their resources while they're talking face to face. Well, virtually face to face through cameras. So that's not changing. 90% of the people we talked to said not only are they seeing increased bandwidth demand, but they need to update Wi-Fi to support the increased mobility they're seeing in their corporate environments, because people are not tied to their desk like they used to be. Like they don't even have desks sometimes. It's hot desking all the way. And like they are, they might sit in a different place each day. They might actually work in the cafeteria that traditionally didn't really have a lot of Wi-Fi coverage, or they are spending a lot more time connected to the network in conference rooms because for some reason they are having face-to-face meetings instead of sending each other Zoom invitations. And so they are, you're seeing a lot of high density of connections happening in places where you used to not have a lot of access point coverage, because you in the past made sure that all the cubicles had great coverage, but not necessarily the cafeteria or the kitchen or the conference rooms or the lobby or the courtyard. Like I see people working in courtyards at tables under umbrellas if it's sunny out. It's happening everywhere. So you need to expand your coverage. Like you walk around a university today and like there are access points everywhere deployed outside, because they know that the coverage needs to be everywhere. And I think the general enterprise is moving in that direction too. And on a related point, that is driving a lot of location-based technology interest. Like 83% of the people we talked to said, or surveyed, told us that hybrid work has created an interest in using location-based technology to support the fact that people are working differently. For instance, it may potentially help them track like hot desking, like who's sitting where. Can I reserve this desk? I want to, is there a conference room available? Is there, now there are these little phone call rooms, like where it's just like one chair and a tiny table in the room the size of a closet. And that's where you make your video calls, because, you don't want to distract your people that are sitting near you at your hot desk. So you get up and walk into your phone call closet, whatever they call it. I don't think one, single person conference room, but anyway, they need to track usage and book them. So that's changing things. And then also network access policy is just getting a little messy, because you have one tool for managing access policy for secure remote use, like, people working from home, and then maybe have another tool for managing network access in the home, and in the office. And how do you have consistent policy across those? 76% of the people we surveyed said they're interested in unifying access policy management across on-premises networks and remote users, because those people are floating back and forth and they want consistency. But only 27% felt that they're fully effective at that right now. People who use VPNs for secure remote access were less likely to say they're effective with this. So that's something to keep in mind. And we also found that if they were effective with how they're unifying this policy, whether it's through like an automation tool or adopting new access solutions that can handle both, like there's a growing number of zero trust networks access solutions can manage both remote access and on-premise access, for instance, software-defined perimeter too. I mean, there are all kinds of solutions that are coming along. But yes, when people told us that they felt they were effective in unifying policy across those two domains for their hybrid workers, they were more likely to report that they had remote workers who were productive. So there's less friction for those people when they're trying to get access to resources because the access is consistent no matter where they're working. Reduced security and compliance risk. There are fewer holes in how things are pieced together and less chances that you're going to screw things up and leak data or get infected or whatever. And there's just an improved ability to balance network experience and security, because we ask people, like, are you able to do that? Are you able to balance the needs of both, or are you trying to balance the needs of both? And those people who said that their policy management was well unified across domains were able to say that, yes, this is what we're trying to do. So that is, those are reasons why you should be thinking about that. So just some final thoughts, recommendations to people who are thinking about this whole remote access revolution and hybrid work, remote work or hybrid work explosion that's probably never going away. As a network team, you got to build alliances with other groups, especially security and IT service management. We see that's what people are striving for right now. You need to be using selective use of, you need to selectively use network hardware in home offices. That can help with things like user experience and security and invisibility. You need to look at alternatives to VPNs, because I just don't think that's the future of this. And a lot of people would agree with me. You need to argue for budget to upgrade your tool sets. You need secure remote access solutions that offer integrated network security, automation, centralized management, and network optimization or network enhancement of some kind. You should consider endpoint monitoring and synthetic monitoring to enhance your overall observability of remote workers. And you need to be ready to face the fact that hybrid workers are going to test your on-premise networks in terms of bandwidth and mobility, and that policy management is going to get messy unless you can unify it across remote, home office, work from anywhere. Basically, wherever someone's working, you need to have a unified access policy, whether they're like in their home, they're at a coffee shop, they're on a train, or they're in your office where supposedly they're safe and sound, which even then they aren't necessarily going to be. But those are the recommendations that I pulled out of this research. So with that, I'm going to, and here you see the cover of the report, which published this week. And although it says July on there, it published this week. And there's a link to download it if you want. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Raleigh for Q&A.
Thanks, Shamus, for all of those great insights. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. The first one is, why isn't a traditional VPN good enough for remote and hybrid work?
Well, kind of touched on that around the edges during this entire presentation. One issue is people want to coordinate access policies across on-prem and remote, and VPN is not really suited for that. It's a siloed technology. It's not like I don't think a lot of people would even know how to go about like integrating a VPN solution into a unified policy solution. So newer technologies that this research showed people are using are more likely to be able to extend access policy and access control across domains, whether it's the remote user edge or the corporate premise. So that is one reason why I think people are turning around from VPN. Also, VPN just lacks like granularity in terms of policy and security. Like, you're giving users access to your network at a time when zero trust is in vogue. And which means that a lot of people are focused on like limiting to least privilege access, saying let's segment our network and only like give people access to what they need. And the VPN is not really a technology set up for that. Like it's authentication static. You log in and you have access to whatever is available through that VPN, regardless of who you are, where you are, what device you're on, what time of day it is, whether you're sober or not. And it's just opening things up for disaster, because with someone that, like, if you've got that login, your VPN credential like on a post-it note, and someone just grabs it, then they are you, and they're just getting everything you have. Like a more sophisticated and granular solutions will recognize if it's you or not. They'll say, oh, this person does never access that application before, or that they've never downloaded a terabit of financial data before. We better stop that. Let's challenge them to re-authenticate, or let's just cut him off and send the police to their house and see what's going on. VPNs can't do that. So I think those are a couple of reasons. There are plenty others, but I don't think I have enough time to go into it.
Well, thanks for sharing those insights, Shamus. We'll have to have another webinar to get additional information.
Okay.
The second question is, what's the best approach to monitoring and troubleshooting remote worker experience?
Okay, we touched on that a little bit. It's going to depend on your budget, your skilled resources, your requirements for what you need to see. Like, I think what we saw here was that endpoint monitoring, endpoint management tools are pretty popular, and I think that's pointing to an indication that that's getting the job done for a lot of people. Like, what's the state of your endpoint device? What's a typical like transaction look like on that device? But it's expensive, and so I don't think it's like, can you afford to deploy agents for that endpoint management solution to all 30,000 of your employees? Maybe not. So you might have like a multi-pronged approach. Maybe you got some active synthetic monitoring tools that give you good visibility from, certain points on the internet, or that can tell you what's happening like regionally, or you might deploy those probes into some of your home office environments to give that point of view, which might be a little more affordable than an endpoint management solution, but still can get expensive the more you deploy it to more homes and stuff. So I think you should take a tiered approach. Basically, you should definitely monitor your critical applications closely to see how that's affecting end user experience, and then also monitor the users who are high impact on your business with the best tools that you can afford, and then recognize the fact that the rest of your users who, best effort is more appropriate in terms of like how closely you can support them and respond to their needs. You can use a secondary tier of tools to address that. Like, okay, I am going to remote into your desktop and figure out what's going on. Or I'm using, I'm monitoring the VPN concentrator. I'm monitoring my SASE POPs or whatever to understand what's happening on a global level with you, and in particular. So, if you've got an unlimited budget and the resources to use new tools, you can spend on things that are going to give you like 100% observability of every end user in every home office. But for those people who can't afford that, like, you've got to do a sort of a multi-tiered tooling approach where you are figuring out who needs what and aligning your tools to that. So that's my recommendation.
Thanks, Shamus. And what would you recommend for a company that only uses cloud-based programs such as CRM, Salesforce, email, Google Workspace?
Okay, if you're like 100% using SaaS-based tools, you probably want like an active synthetic monitoring tool that can understand what the path looks like and what the response time is and all that from your end user to that SaaS service. Or failing that, like having a monitoring tool that has like global points of presence across the internet and can do like active synthetic monitoring of how like traffic from where your workers are located is moving towards those SASE solutions. Depending on how well integrated those cloud applications are into your infrastructure, you might take other approaches. Like if you're directly peering into those SaaS services from like a colo, that might give you other opportunities for monitoring. Like another place to monitor more closely with existing tools that you use for infrastructure monitoring, for instance. And then endpoint monitoring tools would also, or endpoint management, endpoint monitoring tools with like, endpoint state visibility and transaction analysis and real user monitoring and basically digital experience management, which also can include synthetic tools, would be a good choice. I think that's what I can think of off the top of my head.
Great, thank you. You mentioned the issues with home Wi-Fi and ISPs. VPNs don't handle home networks well, but ZTNA aren't much better when it comes to performance. Are there any secure access solutions that focus on network performance as well as security?
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the sponsors of this research, CloudBrink, offers something in that area. And then I think a growing number of SASE and SD-WAN vendors also are doing something in that area as well. They are starting to add some of sort of the network remediation, network acceleration capabilities into agents that integrate into like software agents that can run on endpoint devices and integrate into a SD-WAN or SASE architecture. So yeah, CloudBrink sponsor here that does hybrid access as a service. It's kind of a startup that many of you probably haven't heard of, but then also like a lot of SD-WAN and SASE vendors that are also moving in that direction. So those are some examples.
Thanks, Shamus. Let's take one more question to wrap it up. How do you decide what level of support you're going to give remote workers in terms of network services and user experience?
We asked people in this research that question. I didn't highlight it here because it was like, it's the report here is like 55 pages, so I can cover everything in a 45-minute survey, a 45-minute presentation. But basically, the two things that IT organizations most factor into that decision is, how do we want to support the productivity of our users? And being like, okay, how important is productivity to this class of user? These are here are our customer service reps. Here are our product engineers. Here are our software developers, and here's what they need from the network. So we need to think about how they can remain productive based on that. And then here are other users that they just need to access these applications, these productivity apps, like that don't really put a lot of demands on the network. So we're going to tier them here and think about how they can be productive. And that's going to influence how we handle the networking requirements for all those types of people. While at the same time, they're thinking, okay, now how does the fact that they are outside our corporate premise affect us from a security risk and compliance perspective, regulatory compliance perspective? And so that is the other pillar of their decision-making process: productivity and security. Those are the things they think about. Organizations that told us that they are the most successful with their support of remote users' networking needs, they told us that they prioritize balancing those two things, never sacrificing one in favor of the other if they can help it. Also, a secondary driver, which is kind of related to productivity, was we want to keep our employees happy. We want them to have a satisfactory experience when they're working. Like, we don't want them frustrated. Because if we do a really bad job of supporting their their work experience so that they can't feel like they're contributing, that they feel frustrated all day, they're going to leave, or they're going to just not try as hard. And be like, well, they don't care about me and how I can work to support the business, so why should I care about them and like contribute to the business? So that's like the number 3 thing that they keep in mind. So productivity, security, and satisfaction. Those are the things they think about.
Great insight, Shamus, and that sounds like the perfect end to today's webinar. I wanted to thank our audience for joining us today. As I mentioned, you will be receiving a follow-up email with resources from today's webinar. So I hope you'll check that email out, and I hope we'll see you at a future EMA research webinar. Thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.